Hi, now that you've moved past the divisions of the nervous system, the central nervous system and the components, the peripheral nervous system, and the divisions of that, including sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, we're going to move on to the development. I think one of the reasons I love teaching this kind of material so much is every time I present it, I'm reminded about how amazing it is. The fact that this process takes place and correctly most of the time is just, for me, mind-blowing. So anyway, to get started with this development, I'm going to bring up our outline. And before I show illustrations, which I have some extra documents that I hope will help you kind of visualize some of this. The entire vertebrate system, central nervous system, develops from the ectoderm, and that's a type of cells, and those are found on the outermost layer of the early embryo. So if we take like this little section here that represents the ectoderm, and thickens then into this neural plate, the next step is all of a sudden it kind of goes into a groove. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. We have other illustrations that'll be coming up. And then eventually, and this takes place pretty quickly. I'm not holding you to knowing the timeline exactly, but you must know the sequence. And then so you have this fold now, the neural fold, that came from the neural groove that started as a neural plate. Now it actually goes all the way around, seals itself up, and becomes the neural tube. Tissue that eventually develops into the entire CNS actually starts out as this tube, fluid-filled, with fluid in it, and that's the neural tube. Neural ectoderm tissue is pinched off as that neural fold comes together, and it's called the neural crest. Those become PNS neurons. Mesoderm, meso, think kind of like in the mesa in the middle, tissue forms bulges, and those bulges are called somites, and they are what becomes the 33 individual vertebrae. Okay, so first I want to come back to this illustration right here, and this will be uploaded for illustrative purposes. Here is a little better rendition of the neural plate. And then you can see it moving to the neural groove, and then becomes the neural fold. And finally, here we go. We see that it connects at the top and forms a tube. You don't need to know about the primordial ganglion if you are worrying about that. So, coming back to our outline, I have looked up an active YouTube video. It's brief and it talks through this next section, and kind of starts with the things that I just talked to you about. I'm going to let you watch that on your own rather than take time up during this video lecture. So you can go to that and watch that and then come back to this next section of your outline. So this is when I really wish I could just walk up to the board and illustrate this. It makes it so much easier. Rather than going back and forth between a whiteboard and this, and a whiteboard and this, I have included some more diagrams that I'll go through. And for now, you're just going to have to deal with yellow lined paper. I'm sorry. But here is the neural tube at the anterior end, which would be, if we're looking at the way we are, would be this way, okay? We have the foremost section up here is the forebrain. There's another term for it called prosencephalon. Encephalon, you can see is used a lot. Pro meaning kind of before, first, and so, but for the purpose of how I will test you, I will say forebrain. Just know it's the same thing. And then it will develop a bulge in the middle, or a swelling, and that's the midbrain. And then down here is the hindbrain, and sometimes that's referred to as rhombocephalon. Okay, same thing. Now it doesn't stay like that. The forebrain, remember the outermost part, develops into two sections, the furthest most out. So remember, we're kind of going from the top of us because we're not standing on our hands and feet. That top section or swelling is the telencephalon. Think about a telescope moving out, looking far away. And then under that is the swelling is referred to as a diencephalon. This is included in that video, so if you watch that YouTube video, this should sound very familiar to you. Just want to make sure we go through it through our notes. We get to that midbrain. Remember how we have that forebrain and then that midbrain? That one does not divide into two swellings. That stays as one, and it's referred to as a mesencephalon. And then finally, that hindbrain towards your hind end, basically, develops into two swellings as well. And this one is the metencephalon, and then as you move down to the very base of your brain, it will be the myencephalon. And to me, that's very easy to remember because you're like really proud that you have finally right here, myencephalon. Another little hint for remembering this order. If you can remember the fact that tele sounds like a telescope and is out the most, the rest are all in alphabetical order. We have di, we have mes, we have met, and we have my, okay? So hopefully that will help a little bit and in terms of remembering that. So before we go on anymore, I want to bring this other document up for a moment and just show you, oops, sorry about that, and show you that I have that also in this particular diagram that I pulled, and it shows the embryonic brain regions, forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain, and here you can see the breaking off, telencephalon, diencephalon, mesencephalon, metencephalon, and myencephalon. And it shows you visually what this is looking like as it develops. And you can see that myencephalon is like right next to, after the myencephalon, then we have spinal cord. And then here are the brain structures that are present in the adult, and it shows which section it is in. And we are going to be going through many of these structures. And this is a good reference for you in terms of looking back and trying to locate where they might be. But I also have some other illustrations and diagrams for you. So hopefully by putting them all together, it will help, and we will move back. And this is why I don't want to do too much in terms of going back and forth. Let's go to the major structures. Now, this actually, I should have made this 4. Don't worry, I'll correct that later on. It's not a big deal as long as you go through. I keep editing my own notes and changing things and deciding that I should put something a little different. And I spend probably way more time on that than I should, but. So now we're going to start thinking backwards. Now hang with me for a few minutes, and then we'll look at these structures on the DVD that you have, okay? So if you think about way down here and you have your spinal cord, right? And then as you move off your spinal cord up into your brain, that first section is myencephalon. And it literally means marrow brain. So if somebody calls you a marrow brain, it's probably not a compliment, because this basically is the part of your brain that contains like those vital processes which are important, but no thinking much, okay? It's pretty much the inner workings and what will be automatic. And caudal, remember when we did directions, that's towards the tail. So that means it's the bottom portion of your brainstem as we stand erect. There are nuclei, and that's why I put in the special definitions, as because you need to know that nuclei here means clusters of cell bodies. And these clusters of cell bodies or nuclei are essential for vital functions. And that includes operation of the cardiovascular system, respiration, even skeletal muscle tonus. Now, just think about if you had to focus on breathing in, breathing out, and maybe during stress you try to do that, but I'm talking about every moment of every day, and the blood pressure that's moving through your circulatory system, breathing, your heart rate, let's keep your heart rate exactly the same or adjust it for different circumstances. You would not be able to think of anything else. That would be your total job. Also, a lot of people don't think about muscle tonus. We constantly have some nuclei telling our muscles to be engaged. Otherwise, we would be slithering down our seats, we'd be like limp and not able to accomplish anything. So I'm not even talking about demanding reflexes or voluntary movements. I'm talking about tonus, so that you are sitting straight up, sort of, or whatever position you are in. And so that's essential. Okay, now let's move up a little. We're still in the hindbrain or rhonencephalon, and we're moving to the metencephalon. By the way, this is a word, it's not PowerPoint, so I'm not bringing these things up one at a time. I hope you're okay with that for this lecture. There may be a couple more that are like this. Anyway, when we move up from the myencephalon into the metencephalon, still part of the hindbrain, we have one very important structure along with some other important things going on there, and that is the cerebellum, which literally means little brain. You can see that cera comes from the brain, bellum is little, and this structure plays a role in motor functions, and it plays a huge role in motor functions, particularly coordinated movements that become more or less automatic, okay? And it used to be thought that that's all it did. It was only, okay, this is your movement. But now we know that there is a role for it in cognition. It's not like your cortex, definitely, but there is evidence that it does play a role in some forms of cognition. That's a whole new kind of area, and one of the reasons it's so hard to keep up with neuroscience and all of this development and the importance of different structures and neural pathways. Anyway, the other thing that I want you to be aware of that exists in the metencephalon is the pons. This is an area of the brain, which the word literally means bridge, where sensory and motor tracts that are coming up come cross from one side of your brain to the other side. It also contains nuclei, clusters of cell bodies for cranial nerves. There are a bunch of nerves that go throughout your cranium for things, including things like your optic nerve just came to me. So also this area contains and is part of the net or reticulum or reticular system that is absolutely essential for arousal. By arousal, I don't mean, oh my gosh, I'm so excited by this event. I mean the fact that you are attending, you know, you're aware of your environment and what's going on around you, okay? So let's move into the middle section that did not divide, okay? It's one swelling, the mesencephalon, lovingly referred to as being in the midbrain. Remember that. Now here, there are a couple of very important features. The tectum and the tegmentum. And this is one of the things that when I was learning these structures a while back, I was a little confused at first because my instructor said they're covering, said the tectum was a covering and the tegmentum was a covering, but they were in the same little section of the brain. I'm like, that makes no sense. So do we have a double covering or what do we have going? So this is what I came up with to try to explain this. So the tectum is at the roof of the midbrain, the dorsal aspect, and it has 4 bumps on it, on this structure. The superior or upper ones, the superior colliculus, more it's colliculi, are very important for visual reflex moving and saccades, like going back. Like if something flies over here, your superior colliculi are important for that. Oh, there it goes again, okay? These, and saccades, those little movements that go back and forth with your eyes. And sometimes, just as a little preview, in some things, saccades can be abnormal and indicative of a certain disease process. Now, if you go down to the lower portion of the tectum, the inferior colliculus, that's important for loud, sudden noises. You will orient. Before you even know what it is, you will orient because of the inferior colliculi. Okay, so let's move to that tegmentum, which is still in the mesencephalon. I look at it as like a covering on the floor, like a rug. That kind of helped me get that covering idea in, and it has parts of the reticular formation in it, running through it, communicating with it. And that's important, remember, for arousal, and also contains pathways between the forebrain, which we are going to get to in a bit, and the spinal cord. So you can tell that is also very important. We are going to be talking a lot about dopamine once we move into some of the mental disorders. And dopamine is important for so much more. It's important for some movement disorders and also for some emotional types of differences. And I used headwaters of 2 major dopamine pathways right now, because these are located within the mesencephalon, we are going to be adding one more major dopamine tract later, and also a smaller, less known dopamine tract. But for now, this is what I would like you to concentrate so that we start building for the rest of the semester. The first is a nigrostriatal system. So there are cell bodies in the midbrain. There's two zones. One is a pale zone, one is a dark zone, and it actually looks black. It's called, this means black substance. And that is because dopamine cell bodies containing neuromelanin reside here. And it's that neuromelanin that gives it its different color from neighboring cells. And I'm trying to introduce you to things a little bit at a time. So I was like, oh my God, I don't want to have to learn all this. Trust me, it will be okay. Dopamine cells that start there in the substantia nigra project to the caudate nucleus and the putamen. I'm going to add one more word we will see later, and it will be spelled out, but I'm going to tell you about it now. Caudate nucleus. I'm sorry, back up. Can I edit this now? Let's stop share. Pause. Maybe I can edit it. Going back to this outline, I'm hoping I can edit that out. Anyway, I meant to say the caudate nucleus. That's what I said. Son of a gun. All right, let's just stop the share. Let's stop the recording.